Hi chums. Today I'd like to carry out a little experiment. See, I was out shopping the other day and I came across these. Now, the size of my set somewhat limits the ability to see that, but what this is a set of very, as you can see there, very cheap artists' acrylics. These came from the works, but you can get similar ones from places like Wilco, Flying Tiger, any sort of WH Smith, anywhere kind of that sells arts and crafts stuff. Now these are very small tubes of paint, 12 millilitres, which isn't much if you're planning to paint the Sistine Chapel, but if you are into model making, that's the sort of quantity that can last forever. Now, the reason I haven't looked into this before is that people always say that you can't use artists' acrylics on models because they tend to be very thick, they're not great for fine detail, and I agree with that. But I kind of found myself thinking, what if you don't need fine detail? So, as you know from some of my recent videos, I've been experimenting with rust and such like. So what I was wondering is, could I use some of the techniques that I've been using to sort of create a rusty effect with these? So to that end, I have yet another Triang 16-ton mineral wagon, and yeah, I'd like to see how this goes. If you've watched my previous videos on improving these wagons, firstly, thank you very much. Secondly, you'll know that I like to cut away the sort of little bar there. I think that improves the realism of these fairly basic wagons quite drastically. Now, I've got my paints poured out. Squeezed, whatever. I'm using burnt umber, burnt sienna, little yellow ochre, little orange, little black. I reckon between them, that should give me everything I need for my rusty little wagon. So, let's get to work, shall we? Now, I know I said that the thickness of this paint doesn't have to be a disadvantage, but I am wetting my brush a bit to thin this down. Now, you'll notice that I'm not cleaning my brush between colours. I sort of want to blend them as much. That's a bit too yellow. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I kind of want to get a good blend of colour. Going to add a little more water. I'm just going to keep going like that, just sort of playing with paint, seeing what I wind up with. That's fully covered, I'm just waiting for it to dry. As you can see in this, I hope you can see in this not so great light, I've made no attempt to get an even coating. I'm sort of hoping actually that it'll dry a little bit rough to create a heavy corrosion effect. I've also taken advantage of the drying time to go over the chassis in weathered black and pick out the end of the brake levers in white, as is my way. If you're curious about that, then watch, well, pretty much any of my other wagon painting videos. While I wait for that to dry, take a look at these photos. I took these at the National Railway Museum, and they illustrate how quickly even a fairly well-kept steel mineral wagon can rust. You can also see the streaky effect that I like to get on my wagons. Anyway, I thought you might just find that interesting. That's now dry enough for me to start applying the body paint colour, as it were. Now, what I could do, and what I've done in previous builds, is use a cocktail stick to scrape the paint away. See my previous videos on Triang mineral wagons. But what I'm going to do instead is a technique that I used on my last Hornby 20-ton mineral wagon, which is that I'm going to stipple on some light grey. Now, I've actually watered this down a little bit because I think that's going to sort of create more of a patchy effect, which is what I'm going for. Let's see. The grey stage is now finished. Now, I did actually use model paints for this. I should have mentioned that earlier. This is just like Vallejo, but whatever works for you. I've sort of applied it using a variety of techniques, a bit of stippling, a bit of sort of thinning down with water, a bit of dry brushing. It's not quite there. I'm not sure exactly what's missing. I'm gonna have another go at it and see what I wind up with, though. I think maybe what it's missing is markings. I will add the markings, and we'll see how it looks then. This is all experiment. This is, I have no more idea how this is going to turn out than you do. Actually, if you're an experienced modeler, you might know exactly how this is going to turn out, and you might in fact be laughing at me, which is very mean. I hope you're not doing that. Anyway, I'll see you after I've applied the markings. I think it's getting there. The paint has sort of, I don't think you can see it very well here, but the paint's sort of taken on a rough kind of texture. Kind of as if the rust is bubbling through, which I like. That's pretty much exactly what I wanted. So, next up, let's do my usual thing where I apply some watercolour and some powder and weather this bad boy. I've added the first watercolour wash, and what I've done, I've kind of added these rusty streaks, but what I've tried to do is have them kind of originate on the bubbly bits of paint to make it look like, that's where the rust is coming through. So next up is the powdering. Finished. So I've done the watercolour, I've done the powder and everything. Yeah, I think that looks. I think that looks okay. I think that came out all right in the end. So, in answer to the question I posed at the beginning of the video, you can indeed paint a wagon using cheap artists' acrylics, but I'd say only if you sort of want a rough finish. I'd say it's definitely worth a go if you want a sort of heavy corrosion look like this. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you soon for another video. Cheerio.